your job as a business owner is to continually solve problems. And every problem that you notice and you do nothing about will not go away. They'll stay there and they'll fester and they'll become bigger and you'll have to deal with it at some point. Jared Williams. Do you like that one? That was good. It's a little different.
I was just about to give you a big thumbs up.
Just because. Hey, I told you you're starting, starting.
Yeah, just
Yeah, that's
wasn't
okay.
listening to you.
My talking is more for my own benefit than anybody else's.
Okay, cool.
How's it going, man? How you doing?
Duly noted. Good.
Yeah. Staying busy?
Doing good. Yeah.
Yes.
Super busy. Been taking sales calls, as you know, for a new course that we put out. If you guys want some business coaching, you can apply. There's a link down below. We'll get in touch. We'll hook you up, teach you how to run your plumbing business, right? But yeah, taking calls, sales calls, because I got to figure out the sales process and figure out what's going on and how people are thinking and what exactly they think they need. And then try to steer them towards, you think you need that, but you need this.
Yeah. So,
right.
Yes.
And it's
so far,
it's
what do people think they need? Have you noticed like a trend?
Maybe not a trend, but they kind of think like, they're like stuck in one spot or like they're just focused on their one problem. So like they don't have enough work, so they need help on marketing. And so they just want to, say, okay, I need help on marketing. Can you help me with marketing? I'm like, yeah, I can help you with marketing. But like the second we solve your marketing problem, you're going to find yourself in another problem. Right. Because that's all it is when you're growing your business. It's just solving a series of problems. Like business in general is just problems. Like even from the get-go of like, you're going to somebody's house to solve their problem, right? That's what business is. And then in doing that, it creates problems on your end because now you're like, okay, I got to figure out how to take a phone call. I got to figure out how to schedule a job. Got to figure out how to get there. Got to figure out how to actually fix the problem. Got to figure out how to build the customer. Like those are all really like early problems. But then when you start growing, you just create more problems, right? That you then need to learn how to like manage and how to solve, right? And so there's systems and processes and ways of doing things to solve those problems. But I guess the hard part is like somebody's like, okay, I'm a plumber. I know plumbing. I can go to their house. I've got that part figured out. Now, my problem right now is marketing.
Yep. Sure.
And that's all they see. So it's like tunnel vision. Like, and I get it because they haven't been there, right? So it makes sense. It makes sense to think, okay, I can go do the work, but now I just need more work, which is true. But like I asked a guy today, I'm like, well, I mean, what if I solved your marketing problem and you got 1,000 calls this month? You're going to have a new problem, right? And so kind of the benefit of a coach or somebody that's been there that can walk you through that is that he's already been through those problems, right? So like I know that this guy thinks he's having a marketing problem, but I know exactly what's going to happen if we solve that marketing problem. And I also knew that like, he is not set up to even solve that marketing problem. Like you get this all the time, like guys aren't putting marketing in their budgeting and they don't even know how to do that. Like they don't know how to come up with a marketing budget. They don't know how to include that marketing budget into their expenses to help them figure out their hourly rate. And then they're not calculating that in what they're actually billing out to the customer. And so they're actually not making enough money to be able to pay for the marketing in the first place. But all they see is I have a marketing problem or I, not even that, like I need to get more calls. Even like some of them don't even realize, okay, more calls comes from marketing. To pay for my marketing, I have to charge enough money for it. I have to actually budget enough money and charge enough to the customer so that I can pay for marketing to get more customers. Right. So you can see now we've just started with a problem of getting calls, but now it's turned into like, okay,
Right.
how do I budget? Okay, how do I
Right.
like what kind of marketing do I do and how much do I spend on each one? And then how do I, you know, those people are going to call me or they're going
Mhm.
to fill out a form or how are they going to get a hold of me? And then how am I going to make sure I'm converting those
Mhm.
calls to a book job? And then if my marketing was working
Mhm.
really well, right? Where do we go from there? What if
Right,
I got
sure.
too many calls then?
Sure.
Now what do I do? Like you just start opening up this can of worms of
Mhm.
tons of problems. Yeah. And it's that's hard to communicate to them to get them to see like, what you're focused on right now seems like your problem, but there's a lot more problems you're going to
Mhm.
run into. And probably your
Mhm.
best bet is to get in touch with somebody who's been through those problems, who can be like, "Hey, you think you have a marketing problem, but before you solve that marketing problem,
Right.
you need to go solve this problem first,
Right.
or you're going to run into this other problem, and that problem's
Yeah,
really going to
yeah,
hurt if you
and
run
I
into
think
it."
there's an assumption that plumbing business owners have is that they have it figured out to some extent. And so they're like, "No, I got this, man. I just need
Mhm.
this." And then the coach can be like, "Well, let's
Mhm.
just make sure you do have it. I'm not saying that you don't have it, but let's just double check. Let's just make sure."
Right.
And then you start to dive into those
Yep.
questions and then you're like, "Okay, so let's just paint a picture here. You say you do have it. You're charging $180 per hour and you feel like everything is going how it
Mhm.
should and you have this vision of where you want to be and you want to be, you want to cap out at 2 trucks. Like that's where in your head you think that that's where all the success will be for you. And then you just start to have to eventually walk this person to this path of like, well, let's see what happens if this is where you land. Like, so you're already undercharging and you have a cap for some reason because you think it's going to yield you the life that you want and you're going to live this story, but let me tell you what that's actually going to look like, which is where the coach can come in, because he's like, I've been where
Yeah.
you are and then I've been at two
Yeah.
trucks and this is what I have to
Yep.
experience. Do you think that this is a
Yep.
situation that you want to be in? And then it's convincing that person that you will be in the same
Yep.
situation, because ultimately, no matter which market you're in,
Mhm.
you're solving the same problems for the same customers. It might be slightly different. Like
Yep.
if you're in New York, you have to walk more because you might not be able to park right on the curb, right? If you're in Alaska, you got to dig more because everything's deeper. But at the same time, there's still somebody like, hey man, something doesn't work in my house.
Yep.
I can't do a thing. And you have to go and take care of that. So
Exactly.
it's yeah, it's tough getting people to sort of like see that, and especially in like a short minute, right? Because you're talking to these guys just on the sales calls in like half hour, right? Maybe longer,
Yeah.
to really just sort of like
Yep.
really ask them good questions that every plumbing business owner should be asking themselves. Like nobody should assume that everything is just like, yeah, I got it. Like, because I know you don't in your business. You're not just like, yeah,
Mhm.
everything's running perfectly. Like you're always considering like,
Nope.
okay, things are good, but what if something isn't good? How am I going to react?
Yep.
And like, how can I predict that problem so I can
Yep.
solve it before it even happens?
Yep. Yep. All the time. Yeah, it's a tough thing to communicate. Like, if I could just, I guess this is my soapbox to talk to everybody to this podcast, it's like, you know, I guess just recognizing that there's problems and as you solve problems, there's going to be more problems, but eventually your problems will get
Sure.
smaller and smaller and smaller. But that comes at a
Hmm.
point, you can, like, I was just talking to a guy. He only wanted to grow to 4 trucks. And I'm looking at that. I remember when I was in 4 trucks and it was not fun because I had to
Yeah.
be the general manager, right? I had to be the general manager and the business owner. And, you know, when you start growing a business, you're like the business owner who is the marketer and the guy hiring and recruiting and making sure everything is running properly and all that stuff. And then you got to go play the
Mm-hmm.
general manager role on top of that. So then everybody's coming to you for stuff and you're trying to have meetings over here, Zoom meetings, trying to set up this new
Mm-hmm.
software or whatever, right? And it's a you just end up having this
Yeah.
crappy job. Now, can you make good money doing that? Yeah, you can. But it's like when I got to that point, it was like, man, I should just hire a few more guys and hire a general manager. And then I don't have to do this at all. And then my life becomes so much better. My problems,
Sure.
that created some other problems, but then we were able to solve those problems, right? And now our problems are, the bigger you get, the bigger your problems get, but there
Sure.
there's
Yeah,
less of
sure.
them, right? So in the beginning, when these guys are coming in, they started a plumbing business. They're taking calls, they're going out and billing work, they're doing drain cleaning, whatever,
Mhm.
replacing water heaters, right? They have a
Mhm.
lot of little problems. And like
Mhm.
we said, they can't even see them. And they're just
Mm.
trying to solve these little
Problems are
problems and
right
trying to
here. That's
figure
all
these
they can see
things
is the
out.
problem right in front of their face.
That's it. And then as they grow, the problems will get less
Sure.
often. They'll just be bigger problems,
Mhm.
more
Mhm.
expensive problems, right?
But it's
So
really important to
yeah.
have, like, mm, everything in line so that when those bigger problems do happen, that you're not having to still put out fires that are continuous behind you as this big problem happens. I mean, like, one thing we can talk about
Oh yeah.
is always, like, you think that everything is good, right? Because the season that you're in, just the season of the year, you're like, man, we're busy. Everybody is just humming along. Like, business is good. This is awesome. Like, let's hire some more guys. And then suddenly you just hit this slump. And then you're like, okay, wait. I thought everything was good.
Mhm.
And maybe up until this point, you've been proudly
Yep.
repping, like, man, we just got word of mouth. That's all we need for marketing. Like, it's going to take us to the top. And you're just like, we're good. And
Uh-huh.
you come to this point where suddenly you don't have any work. And then, like, now you have a big problem.
Yep.
And so,
Yeah.
so what's the,
Yep.
let's just take this as an example, because I think we can find things just even in that example where there are some problems that we didn't address early on that are now making this big problem a lot harder to solve, right? We don't have any work, but we got a lot of
Mhm.
guys. What do
Yep.
we do? We've been surviving on word of
Yep.
mouth and
Yeah.
maybe some other light form of marketing, we'll say.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean the problem, like the earlier problem that you didn't solve is you didn't do
Sure, early
enough
on.
marketing. Like you either didn't invest in, maybe you invested in your brand, but you didn't invest in like pushing that brand out to the community. You probably didn't invest in pay per click. You probably didn't invest in Google LSA. You're probably solely relying on your
Mm-hmm.
GMB or one
Mm-hmm.
source of advertising, right? Versus somebody with a bigger shop, you know, they need to be well
Mm-hmm.
diversified in their advertising. So they need to be omnipresent. So they need to be
Mm-hmm.
everywhere where their
Mm-hmm.
customer is. And you need to start developing that like early
Yeah.
on because it takes
Mm-hmm.
time to get that ball rolling. So if you roll through a busy season and you're like hire, 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 but then you don't have the marketing to support
Mm.
during the slow season and you've got all these guys, like you're saying, what do you
Yeah.
do? Right? That's a lame spot to be in, first of all. And what like step number 1, you need to like look at it and go, okay, like think about
Mhm,
what's your
mm,
first
mhm,
step, right? What am I going to do in this situation? I'm bleeding money. So how am
mhm,
I going to stop the bleeding? I've got to stop
mhm.
bleeding. What do I do? Fastest way to stop bleeding in that instance, you can
Sure.
wait it out
Yep.
if you've got cash reserves. Um, if you don't have any cash reserves, then the fastest way to stop bleeding is going to be to start
Mhm,
cutting that labor, which is a really tough decision to make
mhm,
for a business owner. It's like the
mhm,
last thing they want to do. Unless you've got some other expense that you just
mhm.
don't need that you're paying for that you could cut that would lower your expenses enough
Mhm.
to pay for the labor, but
Yeah.
that's usually not likely. Like you cut one guy and it can cut like, you know,
Mhm,
10 grand a month
mhm.
off of your overhead. So it's it's the most effective. You're not going to have 10 grand of extra
Sure.
software or some expense that you're not paying anymore. You might find a few
Mhm,
$100 here and there, but you're not going to be able to
mhm,
cut 10 grand like that. So it's probably the best bet to make. Like if you're getting close to the end of your
mm,
cash
mhm.
reserves, especially because if you blow through your cash reserves, then
So,
what's
well,
going
you
to
ain't
happen?
got no cash. Yep. Yeah, lay them off
You're going to
anyways.
have to lay everybody off, right? Yeah. So if you got 4 or 5 guys and you're running out of money because you didn't do enough marketing, best bet is to, before you run out of money, you're
Yeah.
gonna have to cut one of those guys. And it's unfortunate, it
Mhm.
really is, and it's hard to do, but it's necessary for
Sure.
the rest of the business. And so you would pick the lowest guy on the totem pole and
Mhm.
probably let him go, right? Because the wrong thing to do would be to cut things that you
Sure.
still need in order to try and
Mhm.
save your business, okay? So, first thing is I would cut some labor there. Second thing is I would then go back and look. Now that I stopped the bleeding, I would go back and look and I would say, "Okay, what put me in this situation? Like, why how come I can go from super busy to just no
Yeah,
work
sure.
whatsoever?
Yeah.
And how do I
Mhm.
solve that
Mhm.
problem?" Right? And so I would look back and I would say, "Okay, I'm only doing one source of marketing, or I'm not doing any just
Right.
general branding, right? I'm not on social media. I don't have any
Mhm.
social media posts. I'm not spending money to get my
Mhm.
brand out in the community. I'm not sponsoring any local
Mhm.
events, right? Maybe I'm
Mhm.
not on pay per click or I'm not on GLSA. All those things, right? I would go to my
Mhm.
marketing company and say, "Hey, I was super busy during busy season. Now it's slowing down. How do we get more
Right.
calls during slow time?" Right. And yeah, that's usually a matter of just
Mhm.
branding, more
Mhm.
brand awareness, right? And then doing marketing that creates a call instead of relying on
Oh,
buying a
yeah,
call
sure.
that's already been
Yeah, yeah,
created,
yeah.
right? So you can
Mhm.
do outbound dialing, you can do email campaigns, you can do like giveaway things on the internet. So you can pique somebody's interest to actually come buy something from you that they weren't
Mhm.
intending to buy. Right? So they weren't picking up Google and searching for it.
Mhm.
You piqued their interest enough
Mhm.
to where they bought it from you, right? So, then I would go get
Mhm.
those things in place, right? And fix that problem so
Yes.
that it doesn't happen again. And the problem that people run into is they let those cash reserves go, and they go, and they go, and they go, and instead of letting go of a guy, they will go in and they'll say, "Okay, I'm spending a ton on this marketing avenue.
Sure.
I'm gonna let that go to save the money on that, and that'll
Mhm.
allow me to keep this guy on." But the bad part, like, if you stop
You're not gonna
marketing,
have
what's
any
gonna
work for that
happen?
guy anyway.
Are you gonna get yeah, you're already slow and you cut
Just
marketing,
gonna
what's
get
gonna happen?
yeah,
You're gonna get
definitely.
slower. Maybe not slower, but it's
Mm-mm.
definitely not gonna improve.
And
And so, the cost of that marketing, is it gonna
no,
pay for
probably
that
not.
guy?
Well, it depends on what it is, I
Maybe.
guess.
Probably not. Yeah, it depends on what it
Mhm.
is, but probably not, right? And then that's gonna go and hurt
Mhm.
the entire team. It's gonna hurt you as the business owner. It's gonna hurt your family, right? Because then all of a sudden your
Mhm.
business isn't gonna be profitable, all because you just made the wrong decision of what to cut,
Mhm.
right? So, I don't know, I think that's super important to think about that kinda stuff and what's actually going on there. Um, yeah. I feel
Definitely.
for people in that situation because that
Yeah,
is
it's
a
hard.
very tough decision, right? And it's the hard part is, like, it's like, "This
Mm,
is my fault because I didn't do this thing in my business, and now I
right.
have to let this guy go." And he might
Mhm.
be a really good guy, but you can't lose your whole business to try to
Right.
keep one guy
Yep.
afloat. That that's
Mhm.
not fair to everybody else. That's not fair to you, it's not fair to your family, and it's not fair to
Mhm.
everybody else involved in your business.
Yeah. And that's part of, like, being a business owner is you have to be prepared to make those really hard choices because they come to you. Those are your
Yeah.
choices to make. Nobody else can make them for you. And you have to learn how to make
Yep.
them in a way that in that situation particular that is gracious and as transparent as possible. Like I would go about it just to be like, "Hey, like
Yeah.
I got to let you go because I have made mistakes earlier in the business, but I need to let you go and I really want to hire you later, but I got to get some stuff in order first as evidence that we're having this conversation."
Yep.
Because in that moment, it's not really like potentially it's not really a personal thing unless this guy, you can let him go anyway, right? It's just, dang, I made some mistakes and I got to
Right.
readjust, and we need to get more calls, and we don't have any right now. But the easiest way for me to do that, not the easiest, obviously, but the right way to do it is to just cut the labor, and then so we can reinvest in other marketing. And then we'll get you back when we can.
Yep.
And then it's up to you then to win that person back if they are good, by paying them whatever they need, or
Yeah.
however you want to go about that.
Yep. Yeah. And if it was bad enough, like, it might be more than
Yep.
one guy. Like you might have to get back down to, like, if you were 4 guys, you might have to go
Yeah.
back down to 2 guys. And you might
Yeah. And
have to
that's
jump
another
in the
thing that,
truck.
like, just because you find yourself out of the truck, especially if you're in that area, there, if things aren't
Mm-hmm.
done properly in the right order with the right emphasis, then you might have to get back in the truck. And I don't know, you could tell me what you think about this, but my guess would be that some guys would jump back into the truck slower than they should. I know I've definitely talked to guys who'd be like, nah, man, it's hard to keep me out of the truck. Like, that's where I like to be. Like, I like to be out there doing it. And that's like a different idea. That's like a different
Yeah.
potential problem. But then there's the other guy
Yeah.
where it's just like, no, I'm not going back in the truck. I told myself I never would. And that
Yeah.
can really then
Yep.
just put you back in the truck whether you want it or not.
I think it depends on, like, how
Mm,
far you're willing to go. So, like, I was coaching a guy, and if I was him, I would have gone back in the truck just to
mhm,
start creating more revenue. Like, he was down to
mhm,
just pennies, right? Barely making payroll. And he was like, "Nope, I'm not doing it. Like, I got these guys. I'm not laying." He had 2 guys and himself, and he was like, "I am not jumping in the truck. I'm not laying this guy off to
mm.
just have to go do work." Right? And he made it by the skin of his
Yeah,
nose, right? But, like, for
yeah.
him, he could tolerate that. Like, it was his risk level. He was
Sure.
willing to take that risk. So, depends on your risk level. If you're cool watching your bank account go down to, like, nothing, and you can be okay with yourself barely making payroll every week, then cool. But, like, for me personally, like, I remember I was freaking out. I had a few guys, and there was one. I woke up Monday morning and I had 10 grand in the bank. And I was like, I got more than 10 grand worth of payroll coming out on Friday. Like,
Mhm,
I was freaking out, right? Even though I was going to go bill out Monday through Friday and make way more
mhm,
money than I needed for payroll, I was still freaking out because my bank account dropped below
mhm.
what I was going to need a week from then. And so I don't
Yeah,
have
sure.
that in me, right?
That risk tolerance.
Like, if I got down to a couple grand, guys would be gone
Yeah.
and I would be back in the truck. And I would be hustling and bustling and doing whatever it took to get
Mhm,
back out of the truck and get the problem fixed and get more
mhm,
marketing going or whatever and
mhm.
go to town. Yeah,
Sure.
so it depends on your risk
Yeah,
level,
makes sense.
really. Yeah. Yeah, or, like in that guy's instance, he was able to go out and actually like he had the
Mhm,
best attitude possible about it. He, like, went and started printing out flyers and putting them on, tacking them on at the
cool.
grocery stores, for his business, going
Mm,
and leaving, um, business cards at coffee shops and on tables
mhm,
and all that kinda stuff. He started outbound dialing all of his old customers. Like, he had his business for, like, 5 years, and
mm,
he never talked to anybody after once he did work for him, and then some of them he did work for again, but some of
mhm,
them he just never talked to again, and he had, like, thousands of contacts in his cell phone, and so he
mhm,
just started calling everybody. I mean, so he went about it in the best way possible, and then rather than going and relying on his guys to sell the work, he knew that
mhm.
he was better at selling the work. So he actually went out and sold the work
Right.
to make sure that he would get it. So that then his guys would go do the work. And in that way,
Mhm,
he was able to stay afloat and then wait for
mhm.
things to pick back up.
Yeah,
And then he was good again.
yeah, yeah.
Thankfully for him. But I was like, I remember talking to him
Mhm,
and I was like freaking out for him. I was like, dude, you're
mhm,
getting you're getting low. Like, what's your
mhm.
risk tolerance. Like, I want you to push forward through this, but like at the same time, don't
Mhm.
sink your whole company
Mhm.
for one guy.
Right.
Just do not do that. Like,
Mhm.
don't put yourself in that
And
situation.
what you
Right.
said there is really important, is the attitude and the mindset when you're in that situation, because that, I think, is really going to
Hmm.
determine your likelihood of sinking or keeping the boat afloat. Because like sometimes you can get
Yep.
paralyzed, right? You can just be like, oh my gosh, like what do I even do? Like, and your reason sort of leaves you, and then
Hmm.
like in that
Hmm.
case, that the story that you bring up, what was cool, it wasn't that he just jumped into the truck and just started working really hard. Yes, he did that, but he was also like, no, okay, we still need to generate call volume. Okay, let me go do things in my time
Yep.
that I can get the word about my company and like really start to connect in that way. And it sounds like he
Yep.
approached it in like a, you know, maybe an optimistic way or like a hopeful way, or just like, no, I can
Yeah.
take this and I can change something, instead of just sitting there like, well, let's just wait for the phone to ring. We've been waiting for 2 weeks now and nothing's changed. It's like at that point, like if you're sitting still
Yeah.
behind like the general
Yep.
manager desk or the owner desk and you're in that position, then maybe take it upon yourself to go out there and like, all right, well, I'm just going to print some flyers. Like, what's it going to hurt? I'm doing nothing else except for waiting for the
Oh
phone to
yeah.
ring. I'm going to start picking up my phone and calling
Yep.
people. I have other people call.
It's the whatever it
Mm,
takes attitude. It's the attitude of, I'm gonna be successful and I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Hands down. I don't care what it is. If I gotta go knock on doors for 10
right.
hours a day, I'm gonna go
Mhm.
knock on doors, right? It's that attitude. And because I've worked with people who have that attitude, and they're the ones
Mm,
that
sure.
always succeed. They always win. Is it hard? Do they have hardships? Do they have things that happen that are bad? Yes. But in the end, because of their attitude of,
Mhm.
I'm going to do whatever it takes,
Mm,
they always win. Like, if you want to always win, just
sure.
develop that attitude. I'm going to do whatever
Mhm.
it takes to
Mhm.
make this happen. Right. It's because I've coached people who don't have that attitude too. And they're like, our call volume's low. I'm like, well, what are you going to do about it? Well, I don't know. It's been slow for 2
Mhm.
weeks. We've got nothing. Or my
Mm,
guys aren't
sure.
selling. They're just like, every single job is a diagnostic charge.
Mhm.
Well, what are you going to do about it? I don't know. I'm like, have you thought about it at all? Like,
Mm. Mhm. Mhm.
like what's going on? Like, why do you think your guys aren't
Mhm.
selling? And why am I having to ask you this
Yeah.
question 2 weeks after, like, well,
Yeah.
even months after, right?
Right.
That they're discovering this problem. And it's like, why do you think they're having the problem? What do you think you can do about it? And
Right.
why aren't you doing it already? Right?
Hmm.
Yeah. So, and I don't like some of those companies that I've worked with that are like that, that have that attitude, they struggle for a
Mhm.
long time with things, and they get themselves in
Mhm.
in a lot of trouble, really. And it's like, and it really just
Mm.
boils down to that attitude of whatever it takes. Like, the guys who have the whatever it takes, they're they're realizing their situation, and they're going, okay. They're putting their boots on.
Mhm.
They're calling me on the phone like instantly.
Mhm.
Crap, dude, what do I do? Right? Uh, Even better, most people who have the whatever it takes are like, "Hey, dude, I have this problem.
Mhm.
Here's what I'm thinking about doing about
Mhm.
it. Do you got any more advice?" Right? That's the
Mm.
kind of attitude you want, not the sit back, relax, and
Sure.
watch it all
Yeah.
fail in front of you.
Yeah, that goes all the way back to our very first point that we made, is that your job as a business owner is to continually solve problems. And every problem that you
Yep.
notice and you do nothing about will not go away. They'll stay there and they'll fester and
Nope.
they'll become bigger and you'll have to
Those-
deal with it at some point. And this is true across the board,
Yep.
right? Like there's so many problems that I've had with other coworkers that I didn't address at the beginning and I still had to address later. And it was just a different conversation,
Yep.
usually more difficult because then there was just more time. When if you just find the problem and you're like, oh, I've identified this problem. Um, Especially if your gut is like, yes, this is a problem, then you should be like, okay, I just need to pause right now. I need to deal with this really fast, hopefully, and then just move on it.
Yep.
Because if you don't, it's just going to be there and it's going to be in the back of your head when you get a real problem. And now you got to deal with 2 problems and 3 problems, 4
Yep.
problems. And it just gets harder. So be a really competent problem
Yep.
solver. See yourself in that light.
Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. Don't let it become a bigger problem later on down the road where you gotta lay
Yes.
people off.
No,
'Cause
nobody wants to do
nobody
that.
wants to do that.
Um,
That's like my number one
yeah,
nightmare when I hire people.
yeah,
I do not wanna lay them
yep.
off, right? I'm gonna do whatever it takes
Except for
to
cutting
not
your
lay them
marketing.
off.
Yeah,
Yeah, never cut your marketing.
yeah,
Always keep marketing,
yes.
no matter
Don't
what.
touch it.
Do not cut your
Yeah,
marketing. Worst thing you could ever
yeah.
do.
Hmm. Cool, man. I appreciate this conversation.
Cool,
Thanks,
man.
dude. Yep. See you
Yeah,
next
see you, man.
Wednesday.